So, before I proceed further, I would like to tell you that the rape of the lock is an example of social satire. At this point, you need to know what is the meaning of satire. I'll explain and I'll discuss with you some important points related with the poem, The Rape of the Lock. I'll discuss the plot outline and also the important characters, and then the themes and the features of the poem. But before I come to that point, I would like to explain these two, three important points which are very much related to the poem. Like as I have told you, that this is an example of social satire. And this poem is also an example of mock epic. And in this poem, the poet has used heroic couplet. So you must know all these 3 points before I come to the poem. Now, this poem, as I have just told you, is an example of social satire, and it's called Augustan satire basically. What basically satire is? Now, the word satire, it can be described as the literary art of, diminishing or derogating a subject. What do you do basically in a satire? You try to diminish or derogate a subject by making it ridiculous. And the basic purpose of this is correction, amusement, contempt, scorn, and indignation. All these points are done for the purpose of correction, actually. So, what is satire? Satire is the literary art of, derogating or diminishing a subject by making it ridiculous and evoking toward it attitudes of amusement, contempt, scorn, or indignation. Now, the point is, how is it different from the word, comic? Because sometimes you say it's satire and sometimes it's comedy, or sometimes you say it's satiric and sometimes you say it's comic. Now, it differs from comic in that comedy, evokes laughter as an end in itself. The basic purpose of comic is that it evokes laughter, and its end, laughter is basically an end or the purpose of, comedy. But satire derides. This is the word, derides. Because, it uses laughter as a weapon and against a butt that exists outside the work itself. So, satire is basically a weapon to criticize the people. Now, I have just told you that, this poem is an example of Augustan satire. As you know, that this poem was written in the year 1712. The first edition was brought out in 1712, that I'll tell you later. And the period from 1700 to 1744 was the age of Pope, because Pope dominated the age, and you can call it Augustan age also. What is Augustan age and what are the important features of Augustan age, that I have already explained in one of my video lectures. You can go through it. Now, 18th century is basically known for satire, and you'll find out satire in prose, in poetry, and also to a certain extent in drama, though drama was not very popular in 18th century. Now, the satirists of 18th century, they like to call themselves the heir of Roman poets, heir of Roman poets, because they drew inspiration from the Roman poets, especially two Roman poets. One is Horace and the other is Juvenal. These are two Roman poets, and they drew inspiration from these two Roman poets. Now, a satire which follows the pattern of Horace is called Horatian satire, and then we have juvenile satire, Juvenalian satire. Now, what is this Horatian satire? Now, Horatian satire tends to take a gentle and more sympathetic approach. The approach here is, gentle and sympathetic towards the subject which it is satirizing. While this kind of satire, Juvenalian satire, it identifies the object of its satire as evil, and we have contemptuous invective to ridicule. So this is actually the difference between Horatian satire and juvenile satire. The example of Horatian satire in the Augustan age, the rape of the lock is an example of Horatian satire. And another work which you can, take an example of Horatian satire is Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels by Swift. Examples of Juvenalian satire include Swift's important text, which we call a modest proposal. A modest proposal. This is an example of, Juvenalian satire. So I have given these examples because whenever you are going to study the rape of the lock, then I think you need to know all these, important points. Now, another important point which I would like to discuss before I come to the poem, that I would like to discuss what mock epic is, because it's an example of mock epic. Okay, I think the word may be new to you. You must have heard the word epic, but not mock epic. So I would like to discuss first and explain the term mock epic. Then we shall discuss the poem. So let us now discuss what mock epic is. Mock epic. Now, as I have just told you that you must have heard the word epic, but you have not, this word may be new to you. Ramayana and Mahabharata, for example, are the great examples of, epic. Now, before I explain this word, I would like to introduce to you this word, burlesque. Now, what is this burlesque? Burlesque means it's an incongruous. It's an incongruous imitation. Okay. Now, it imitates the manner. Manner means here form, style. Okay. And sometimes matter also of a serious literary genre. Okay, but makes the imitation amusing. Okay, by drawing a ridiculous parallel between manner and the matter. Okay, so if there is a kind of disparity between its manner and the matter, or the matter and the manner, it becomes an example of burlesque. And why do actually the poets use burlesque? Burlesque are basically written for the purpose of fun. Now it's a form of satire, because whenever you discuss Augustan satire or satire, you can say the burlesque is a form of satire. Now you see, in a burlesque, the if you say burlesque imitation, then the form and style may be either low or higher in level. Okay. So, if the form and style are elevated, but the subject is low or trivial, we have high burlesque. Okay, there are two kinds of burlesque. Okay, there are two kinds of burlesque: high burlesque and low burlesque. So, what is high burlesque? If the form and style are elevated, but the subject is low or trivial, we have high burlesque. And if the subject is high in status and dignified, but the style and manner of treatment are low, then we have low burlesque. Mock epic, because I have just told you about mock epic, that what mock epic is, and why am I going to tell you this about burlesque and all that? That mock epic, or the mock heroic poem. Okay, you can give another word for that. That is mock heroic. Now, mock epic or mock heroic, it imitates it. It imitates the elaborate or dignified form and ceremonious style of epic genre, but applies to it to a commonplace or trivial subject matter. Okay, so what is mock epic? Mock epic basically imitates the elaborate form and ceremonious or dignified style of the epic genre, but that dignified style, that elaborate form is used for some trivial object, some insignificant object. So a mock epic is a poem which makes a parody of epic conventions. Parody of epic conventions. In a mock epic, the subject is trivial and the style is grand. Okay, so if you want to understand a mock epic, so you have to go through some important characteristics of the epic. Now, I'll discuss it in quite detail when I discuss the poem. Coming to another term, the third term which I wanted to tell you, that this poem is, and in this poem, the poet has used heroic couplet. And heroic couplet was very popular in 18th century. One important couplet which was used in 18th century was this heroic couplet. So before I proceed further, I just wanted to tell you something about this heroic couplet. Heroic couplet means lines of iambic pentameter. So lines are lines of iambic pentameter, which rhyme in pairs. That is, you can say rhymed iambic pentameter lines are couplet. Why? Or you can say this is A, B, B, C, C. This is the rhyme pattern which you'll find out. Now the word hero, this is actually the meaning of couplet. Now the word heroic has been used with it because this word heroic was applied in the later 17th century because of the frequent use of such couplets in heroic poems with epic poems. This, verse form was introduced into English because very often this question was asked in some competitive examinations. This verse form was introduced into English poetry by Geoffrey Chaucer in his poem, The Legend of Good Women. This was the poem written by Chaucer, and he used heroic couplet here in this poem for the first time. And Canterbury Tales is also a poem where he had used heroic couplets. And this heroic couplet has been used constantly ever since the time of Chaucer. From the age of John Dryden through that of Samuel Johnson, the heroic couplet was the predominant English measure for all the poetic kinds. So this, when you read the poem, you'll find out how prominently the poets, Alexander Pope has used heroic couplet in the poem The Rape of the Lock. Now let us now discuss the poem, that what is this poem all about. Now this poem, The Rape of the Lock, which I have just told you, is an example of social satire, Augustan satire, and it beautifully reflects the 18th century society. Now, in this poem, Alexander Pope has tried to depict the 18th century society realistically, the follies and foibles of the time. This poem, The Rape of the Lock, as I have told you in the beginning, it was first published in the year 1712. In 1712, it was first published with 2 cantos. Now, this poem has, 5 cantos. Okay, 5 cantos. Cantos, you can say, are the sections. So, this poem has, 5 cantos. In 1712, 2 cantos were published, and then this poem was revised and it was published in the year 1714 with 5 cantos. So total number of cantos in this poem are 5. It was first published in the year 1712, then it was published in 1714. Now, the poem, as I have told you, is an example of mock epic poem that satirizes the upper class in London at that time. When you try to make difference between neoclassical age and the romantic age, this is the difference, that the neoclassical poets depicted the upper class society, and that is why neoclassical poetry is called town poetry, while rural life is depicted in the neoclassical age. Now, this poem is a mock epic that satirizes the upper class in London at that time. The story focuses on the central character called Belinda. Belinda is the central character of the poem. Her lock of hair is cut off at a social gathering. When you look at the title of the poem, The Rape of the Lock, so it's not basically the rape of the lock, it's cutting off a lock of hair. Cutting of a lock of hair of Belinda at a social gathering. The poem is an example of, as I have told you in the beginning, it's an example of burlesque. And I told you that when you say burlesque, it means trivial subject and the serious theme. Now, though it may seem to us very trivial, but Belinda is outraged that her lock of hair has been cut by Baron. It was cut by Baron. In The Rape of the Lock, Pope uses Belinda and the Baron, these two characters, Belinda and Baron, and Pope wanted to mock 2 of his acquaintances. And these 2 acquaintances are one Arabella Fermor and the other Lord Peter. So these are the two real life characters, Lord Peter and Arabella Fermor. The character Belinda is based on the character of Arabella Fermor, and the character Baron is based on the character of Lord Peter. Now, what happens in the poem? I told you that the poem has a very trivial subject. And what is the trivial subject? Cutting of a lock of hair. Now, Pope wrote this poem, The Rape of the Lock, in response to a request made by his friend John Carroll. He was Pope's friend, John Carroll, a prominent Roman Catholic of the time. Carroll explained that his friend, that is Lord Peter was his friend, had cut off a lock of hair of Arabella Fermor's hair. Ever since that incident, the families had been feuding. They were very close earlier, but now the bitterness started. In order to laugh at the situation and in order to make light of the situation, John Carroll requested Pope to write a work to laugh at this insignificant incident. So Pope wrote this work to make this situation light. Now, Arabella Fermor, whose reference I've just given you, was the daughter of Henry Fermor. Henry Fermor. Known for her beauty, she was the belle, the beautiful lady of London society in early 18th century. After telling her family about the incident involving her lock of hair, they were offended and became estranged from their once good friends, the Peters. As I've just told you, that in this poem, Belinda represents the character of Arabella Fermor. Now, it was written in 1711 and then published in 1712. It went through many, stages before coming the poem as we know it today. As I told you in the beginning, that the first version of this poem had only 2 cantos, but later on it was revised, and the poem has 5 cantos. He wanted to make it more like an epic, and that is why he added supernatural machinery in the poem, and ultimately it was published in 1714. The event in The Rape of the Lock takes place in the early 18th century on a single day. The action takes place in London, and the story begins at noon, as you'll find out in Canto 1, at Belinda's residence, as she's preparing herself for a grand social event. The scene moves to a boat carrying Belinda up the Thames. We have the reference of the river Thames. She's compared to Cleopatra, who travelled in her barge. And Canto 3 to Canto 5, they are set in a place called Hampton Court Place, Hampton Court Palace, a former residence of King Henry VII on the outskirts of London, except for one scene in Canto 5 that takes place in the cave of Queen of Spleen. We have the reference of the cave of Queen of Spleen. So we have only one reference there, change of place. Otherwise, the entire poem has the setting of Hampton Court Palace. Now, though the incident was very insignificant, the cutting of a lock of hair, but we have a great satirical poem. And I told you that the poem was published in 1712 with 2 cantos. But later on, though Pope was stopped by his friend Joseph Addison that the poem is quite okay, you need not revise it. but he has revised it and added the supernatural machinery. And this supernatural machinery is an important characteristic of, epic. So he added supernatural machinery in his, revised edition, and this poem became very powerful. Now, before I tell you you know, the plot outline of different, cantos, let me describe some characters so that you can better understand it. So, the first character, which is very important, is the character of Belinda. I told you that Belinda is based on the real life character of Arabella Fermor, who belongs to an aristocratic Catholic family. Now, Belinda is the example of a vain, artificial, young woman of the time. A woman who is obsessed with her appearance and beauty and tries to attract young men without thinking what the consequence will be. The rape of the lock of hair is significantly symbolic of the violation of chastity that can result in such kind of cases. So we have one character, the character of Belinda, which is the main character based on the character of Arabella Fermor. She is a lady, representative of 18th century women who were very artificial and trying to attract the young men. Next character is the character of Baron. As I told you in the beginning, that the character of the Baron is based on the historical character of Lord Peter, the young gentleman in Pope's social circle. He offended Arabella Fermor and her family by cutting off a lock of hair. So the story is basically based on the character of Belinda and the Baron, that is Arabella Fermor and Lord Peter. Lord Peter cut the lock of hair of Arabella Fermor, and she and her family got offended. Coming to next character, we have, let me clean it first. So we have another character which I told you in the beginning. We have the character of Carol. 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 This Carol is based on the real character of John Carroll. And John Carroll, a friend of Pope, a common friend of Pope and the two families. Okay, that is family of Arabella Fermor and Lord Peter. So this is another character. Then we have Goddess as character. Goddess is the muse. And who the muse is? The muse who, according to classical convention, inspired poets to write their verses. This is an epic convention that epic poets always invoke the muse. So we have the goddess here. Then we have another character, Shock. Shock is basically Belinda's lap dog. We have, the popular fashion of keeping the lap dogs in 18th century. Then we have the character of Ariel. Ariel. Who is Ariel? Ariel is basically the guardian self of Belinda. He or she, looks after Belinda. Then we have the character of Umbriel. Umbriel. Who is Umbriel? Umbriel is the chief gnome. Okay. Who travels to the cave of his spleen, because I have gave you the reference, and returns with the bundles of sighs and tears to aggravate Belinda's vexation. Then we have the character of Brilliant. It is a sylph. It is a sylph who is given the responsibility of guarding Belinda's earrings. Then Then we have another character called Momentilla. Momentilla. Okay. So, not playing a very important role, but these are the characters about whom you must know, because you are going to write your answers also. So, we have Momentilla. That's correct. Who is Momentilla? The self. There was one self whose reference I've just given you. It was his duty to guard Belinda's earrings, and this self whose responsibility was to guard Belinda's watch. Okay. Then we have another character called Chris Pisa. Chris Pisa, another character. Again, self, and the responsibility was to guard Belinda's favorite lock, that lock of hair. Okay, lock. So different selves given to different selves. So what the selves, basically selves are the aerial characters. Okay, aerial characters. Then we have the character of Clarissa. Clarissa. Who is Clarissa? A woman in attendance at the Hampton Court party. She lends the Baron the pair of scissors with which he cuts Belinda's hair, and later, delivers a moralizing, lecture. Then we have the character of Thalestris, Belinda's friend. Thalestris, Belinda's, friends. And then we have the character of Sir Plume. Sir Plume. So, Sir Plume is, Thalestris' view actually. Okay. Based on historical, character. So, these are actually the characters in The Rape of the Lock. So, in this poem, you'll find out, that the story of the rape of the lock is based on an actual incident. As I told you in the beginning, that in which a British nobleman called Lord Peter cut off a lock of hair from the head of a lady called Arabella Fermor, and this resulted in open battle between the Peter and the Fermor families. And it was Pope's friend John Carroll who persuaded Pope to compose a literary work satirizing the absurdity of the dispute. And the result is one of the greatest satirical poems before us. So, I'll continue with the poem, tell you about different cantos, and also, take some specific topics like mock epic, social satire, and others in order to, explain the poem completely to you for the better understanding. Thank you very much.